Hi there, this is Anna from Anna Aspnes Designs. I'm back with a brand new video tutorial, and today I want to share a little bit of the story behind the ArtPlay Palette Melic release and then show you how you can create digital artistry without the use of any photos. So you can see on my screen that I have a number of different folders. This first one here I'm going to get to at the end. It contains a couple of examples using this collection from the Anna Aspnes Designs creative team. And then of course we have the 5 new products that have been released in this collection. We have the ArtPlay palette, a coordinating artsy layer template, WordART, the multimedia Melic, which actually coordinate with the designs in the ArtPlay palette, and then some paper textures. And I hope that in this video I will be able to show you how to use these designs together to create some artistry that you could make into a card or even print to showcase in your home. So I'm going to go ahead and just talk about the ArtPlay palette first of all. In most of these videos I walk you through the folders and tell you what is included, but I thought it might be fun this week to perhaps share some of the inspiration and the work that goes behind these papers. Sometimes I have an idea for a collection, and other times I go to my creative team and ask them what they would like to see in a particular collection. And this week there was a resounding spring note, which is always a bit dodgy at this time of year in March. Currently today we have severe weather with a blizzard warning. So I'm still in the throes of snow where I am living, and as a creative and an artist, I generally am inspired by my surroundings. So it led me to this idea of Melic, which basically means of or relating to song, and just this overall feeling that I get in the creative world of people willing on the end of winter and spring. So I guess we're kind of singing and hoping that spring will arrive. And I'm a big word person. I have a degree in German language and literature, and so I have a keen interest in linguistics, and you'll notice that throughout a lot of my work that I do borrow words from different languages, and I kind of make up my own words as well. So I did a bit of research on this word because I'm a bit of a word person, and it also relates to Greek lyric poetry in the 6th and 7th century BC, so a long time ago. And this kind of led me to the theme of poetry of life, and just this idea that we are all willing on and wishing our time away for a season that has not yet arrived. So I essentially took all of these ideas and then some suggestions for colors from my team, which were essentially blues. There were some requests for some yellows and some reds, and I came up with this primary ArtPlay palette. And so in creating these papers, I wanted to instill this feeling of darkness, kind of a darkness over the season, but then also an inkling of light, and then various flowers. And then these flowers sort of morphed into landscapes. You can see this is more of a wintry landscape with a punch of color. And then I did a couple of pages that included these darker navy tones, which are a bit different for me because I tend to find that it's easier to work in lighter backgrounds, certainly when it comes to blending photos. But then there are always those occasions where we have photos taken at night, and this would be one of those papers that would be recommended for one of those types of photos. I love this piece, which was actually painted by me in the studio, and you can see the balloons, and so this would be great for a birthday or a celebration. Lots of great light yellow colors in this, so would also be good for any spring break travel photos. I always have a favorite with every single collection. Often the first paper that I create is the favorite. In this case, this is very indicative to me of an egg. I like how it's sort of like a tulip, but it's also like an egg, so also great for upcoming Easter pages. And then the primary palette is great for children as well. But I think that my favorite paper of this particular collection is this one. I really love the way that the paint bleeds into these dark areas and then comes down. And then we've got a nice variety of shapes that could be construed as flowers or perhaps balloons. So I'm really loving this collection this time. It's got a variety of different colors and different values in terms of the light and the dark, and also possibilities of the way that you could use this collection. This landscape one, for example, could be used for a water photo. It could be used for a winter photo. And then, of course, with those artsy papers come some of the solid papers, which you can then use with the transfers and overlays. And if you're interested in learning more about that, then you can check out my Artsy Doubles workshop that I'm currently running. And I give you a lot of guidance here of how to use these transfers to create your own custom papers. And so we have a variety of different art strokes, which you can just drag and drop onto your canvas. There's some realistic gold paint textures, some stains. I love this flower here with the texture over the side of the flower, and then more flower shapes. And this one here would be great for a transfer for a night sky. And then an ArtPlay palette would not be complete without the elements, of course, variety of brightly colored elements to showcase this particular palette. I was sure to include a 4-leaf clover because, of course, we have St. Patrick's Day coming up. I love red, it's my favorite color. We have a really fun sequin fan-shaped element here, which could be used in place of a button. I often get asked, what elements can I use instead of a button? Love this paper clip too with the bow. This would make a great bow tie for any of the flower elements included in this collection. There's a poppy here, for example, so you could place the bow over the top here and use the other bow as well. There is one here that could be used as a bow and have them sort of like a kite, where the little bows come down the stem. And this piece of lace here is super cool because it kind of is in the shape of a leaf, so you could add that to the stem as well. I love this yellow. There's nothing like yellow that screams a bit of spring. So I have this sort of seesaw contrast that's happening in this ArtPlay palette collection where the spring is really trying to break through the darkness of winter. I did some coordinating leaves, which is super fun. You can see some of the elements included in there and the tape that's included so that you can just drag it and drop it. And the element will look as though it's been adhered to the page using the tape. And then we have the brushes that come with this as well. It's a pretty fun brush collection with a variety of splatters, some art strokes. I love the textures. You could build this, for example, into one of your flower designs. It has the impression of the stem coming down. This one's more like a balloon, but could also be a rose or a tulip. Some great edge textures. These are really cool for placing on the edge of your pages or even over the top of your photos if you have framed photos. It's kind of fun to stamp these in gray and then perhaps apply a color burn or an overlay or even a multiply blending mode to see how the two layers will interact. You could even try colors as well. Another great edge brush here. So lots of fun different brushes and textures to play with. This one, for example, might make quite a fun blending brush. And there's a paper texture here. I've used this one myself a couple of times. This could be rotated by 90 degrees to create a stem for one of your flowers. So think about how you can use these different brushes, rotate them, and build them into something else. And then with this collection, we of course have the artsy layered template here, and this is a layered PSD file. You can go ahead and just simply drag and drop a background in here. You can change any of the colors of these layers. You could even clip other papers to these layers if you wanted to. Add a photo blends or custom mask a photo into this area, and then add supporting photos to the frames. And then of course you can change the title and add your own journaling. And I really like the multimedia Melic collection this week. All of these flowers or balloons were hand stitched by myself and put together, and they actually coordinate with the paper designs that are included with the ArtPlay Palette collection. So each one of these will correspond to the designs in the papers. And so you can see that these are included in single PNG layer formats. You can use any of these elements individually on your page, or you can drag the multimedia element file into your workspace, and then you can see that all of those layers are set up for you, and you can turn off those layers and use those layers independently if you want to. You can even combine the different elements with one another. So you can bring in, for example, another multimedia element like this one, for example, bring this one in, and then mix and match the elements as you prefer to create your own digital designs. And then finally, we have the WordART mix collection, and of course I have the poetry word. I love this particular font here, so I've used that and I've combined it with another font to create this interesting word art that you can add to your page as a title. And then of course we have some word transfers and then some white wooden text elements. So you can see that in the preview how I have placed some of these different words together in order to create clusters to make more interesting titles. Usually in this space, I will deconstruct a layout created by one of my team members, but today I want to show you how you can create a digital artistry layout from scratch. And I'm going to be working in Adobe Photoshop CC, which isn't a whole lot different from Adobe Photoshop Elements. You will have your workspace in both Elements and Photoshop, and then the two panels that I really want you to be concerned with are the Layers panel and the Tools panel. And if you can't see those on your screen, then you go to Windows and you can see that those panels have check marks next to them showing me that they're open in my workspace. If you're working in Elements, then your Layers panel is likely to be connected to the right side of your screen. And so this is our workspace. This is the area in which we create our canvases and we use all of our tools. The Tools panel really is all of the tools that we are going to need in order to create the layout. And then the Layers panel gives us the ability to be able to see the different layers of artistry that we add to our layout. Because we're working in a flat screen format and we don't have that three-dimensional perspective, then the Layers panel allows us to be able to see all the different layers from which our digital layout is comprised. So the idea is that when we select a tool from the Tools panel, those options will show at the top of your screen in Photoshop or at the bottom of the screen in Elements. So anytime you create some digital artistry, you want to begin with a brand new canvas. So I'm going to go to File, New, and you want to create a new canvas in the size of your choosing. I like to work in 12 by 12 inches, and you want to make sure that your resolution is at 300 dpi. This means that when you take your page to print, it will be of good quality. I leave my color mode at RGB color, with the 8-bit option. And then I go ahead and click OK or Create to create our blank canvas. And if I pull the edges of this canvas out, you can see the edges of that canvas. And then you're going to bring in a foundation for your artistry. This is the base layer. So typically, if you were drawing or painting, then you would add those foundation layers on your canvas. I have done the hard work for you, so you simply just need to go into the papery folder of the ArtPlay palette, and you can bring in one of the artsy papers, or you can bring in one of the solid papers and create your own custom paper using the transfers and overlays. I'm going to go ahead and bring in an artsy paper, my favorite one of this collection, and I'm dragging it onto our canvas, our white canvas here, using the Move tool from the Tools panel. So notice again, when I select these different tools, the options are changing at the top of my screen in Photoshop, and that will be taking place at the bottom of your screen in Elements. So this Move tool is the top tool. I like to have this auto select option checked. You can go ahead and uncheck it as needed simply by clicking on that box. It's also handy to have these show transform controls visible. That way you can see the bounding box or the area that exists around an element. So I'm simply going to click on my artsy paper, hold down that left mouse button, drag, and then release that left mouse button in order to add that paper onto our canvas. And you want to move it into position so that the edges are flush against the edges of your white canvas. You can then go ahead and close out your original paper by clicking in the X mark at the top right-hand corner of that original file. And it's always a good idea to not work on your originals just in case you accidentally change them and save over them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and that will also free up more space in our work area to focus on the task at hand. I'm now going to go and access some of the multimedia files in order to create a focal point. In this particular layout, I'm not going to be using any photos. I'm simply going to be using the Artistry. And when we create a layout without photos, then we need to create a focal point. And we already have that on our layout foundation here, but we want to build on that in order to create visual interest. So I'm selecting all of the layers in this file. Notice that this particular image here is comprised of all of these different layers. And to do that, you're going to click on that first layer, hold down the Shift key, and then click on the last layer to select them all. And then with the Move tool selected and the Auto Select option turned off, you're going to move that into position. And notice now how I drag this over the area of the background design, that the lines of the stitching align with those lines in that background. And you can kind of move them around to find the best fit for your preference, and then go ahead and close out that original. I'm now going to open up and bring in another multimedia file with the intention of mixing these different files. And notice I'm working with the PSD option. Saves me a lot of time to have those layers all lined up on top of one another. I purely add the PNG files for those people that are not working in Adobe Photoshop or Elements. So again, I'm going to select those layers in the Layers panel, and with the Move tool, drag those layers onto my canvas. And you can reorder those layers if you wanted to, so I could bring this down like this if I wanted to. Could keep it at the top. It really just depends how you want the stitching to lie. And then you can start playing around with the different options. So you can turn off the visibility of any of these layers by simply clicking on these layers. So I can turn off the button if I want to. I can turn off this stain if I want to. So I quite like that. I'm going to go ahead and keep that. I'll turn off that stain and perhaps move that button. We'll keep the ribbon and then the flower. Perhaps we can move the flower. We can select those two flower layers, both the flower and the shadow, and bring it up so that it covers some of this red area here. I like how the stitching is partially adhering that flower to the page. And then go ahead and close out that original. Now I am going to navigate to our WordArt folder and select some of the WordArt options here. And I really like that poetry, and it goes well with the Life is Pure Poetry option. So what we can do is we can bring this WordArt in, and we can perhaps just remove this poetry part and instead use the stitching. So I'm going to, again, with that move tool, drag that into position and sort of find the best fit for it there. If I pull this down, then you can see that we have better visibility of that Life is Pure. Remember, we're going to remove that poetry word. And then to do this, we're going to select the lasso tool from the tools panel. It's the third option down, and simply trace around carefully. If you need to zoom in, you can do. I'm just going to do this very quickly. Trace around that and then go edit, cut to remove it. So now you can see how we're able to just nudge this in a little bit further. It's really great when you have your elements close together because that fosters relationship between the two elements. I'm now going to go back to my Word files. I'm going to bring in this beaded threads. I'm also going to bring in this transfer here, and then you can see when I select both of those with the Shift key held down, I'm able to open them, or I should have been able to open them both into the workspace. So we have them now both in the workspace, and again with that move tool selected, I'm dragging this down onto our canvas. You may want to reorder the layers by holding down that left mouse button, clicking, dragging, and then releasing so that it exists above that ribbon layer. And then I want to add this flower perhaps to this area in the background. So I can go ahead and do that. I could also add a blending mode if I wanted to. So hard light, soft light, color burn. I like the color burn because you can see that yellow coming through, but yet we still see the hint of that flower. Go ahead and close out the original. So simply what I'm doing here is I'm taking these pieces and I'm dragging and dropping them onto our canvas and moving them around, much like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, to make them best fit with what I'm trying to achieve. Generally just playing and having fun, which is where the name ArtPlay Palette came into play. I wanted people to take these pieces, have a palette of elements to play with, and then play with them in order to create their own artistry in a format that I have sort of coined as ArtPlay. And then I'm going to go back, and this time I want to bring in one of those textures. Let's bring in one of these paper textures. And I really like to use these for aligning or strengthening lines that already exist in my page. So for example, if I go ahead and I bring this one in, and maybe let's go ahead and bring this one in, maybe this one, let's click OK to open. All of those files will now open into our workspace, and then I can drag them and drop them onto my canvas and use them to add interest to my design. So this is kind of a fun one here. So we can go ahead and see how that could play into our design. You can also rotate them. So again, this is where the show transform controls come in. If you're working in elements, that will show up as your bounding box. This allows you to be able to hover your cursor over the corner of that bounding box to yield these double-ended arced arrows, and then you can rotate that box in order to change the orientation of that particular texture. So we can go ahead and add this down here, for example. I quite like how that looks. It's sort of built maybe a vase for these flowers. Rotate it a little bit. You can even resize it if you wanted to by dragging those in. Notice when I drag the cursor towards the corners of the bounding box, we get a double-ended straight arrow, and that allows us to make the element larger or smaller. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then you can close these out as you use them. Let's bring this one in and see what we've got here. So this one's pretty fun too. Maybe we can use this at the top of our page. Notice how this edge aligns with the brushwork on the background here, and then we have this nice edge and visual interest at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and close that out, and then maybe we'll try this one and bring this in down the bottom here, and we can perhaps strengthen some of those stems at the bottom of our page. Could also perhaps bring this over to this side and add some visual interest on the edge of the page. I like how that sort of plays in with this texture on the flower. Go ahead and turn it off, and now you can see we've got a really great design here that you can take. You could have it printed on any medium you want. You could have it printed on a mug. Maybe you want to make a birthday card. Maybe you want to make an Easter or a spring card. Maybe you just want to let somebody know that you're thinking of them. You could also print this on a canvas or on a print and place it in a frame and put it in a happy spot in your home. And to get your piece of art print ready, you're first of all going to go to File and then go and Save As. And you want to save your Artistry in PSD format. This is the Photoshop format, and it means that when you save this file, you're going to be able to access all of the layers in that file if you decide you want to make any changes later on down the road. So you're simply going to replace this area. You're going to type in your option. So for example, let's go with test, and then navigate to the place that you want to save your image. So let's go ahead and save it here, for example, and then you're going to go and save it again. But this time you want to save it as a JPEG, and this allows you then to save it in a format in which you can either print from your own printer or upload to a provider who will do that printing for you. So I'm going to go ahead and save those. Now if we go back to our digital art supplies, I'm going to go and just navigate to this collection. You can see that we have the PSD file, and then we also have our test page, which we can then upload to print. Also in this folder, I have a couple of other pages that my creative team have made using this collection. You can see that this one by Adrienne, she has used the collection to honor and remember one of her ancestors by blending in a portrait image into the background, adding various layers. She loves to use those paper textures. You can see how layers of those will play in and bring visual interest to the page. She's also used blending modes with the various transfers to really ignite the rich colors in this palette. And then notice how she clusters her elements to sort of frame her image. We've got this big bold area of yellow and then a bold area of red. Either side, it sort of sandwiches our subject in the center. This one is created by Bob, and it has more of a graphic leaning to it. I love how she's used that bow tie paperclip just partially, so she's deleted a portion of it to clip these frames together, and I love the color and the repetition of this artist here, and then the way she's clustered these elements at the bottom. Notice again how she's used those paper textures to align with the photo and contain that image. And then finally, this is a really fun one by Mikey. She has created an extraction of her photo. She's essentially cut out the subject using the tools within Photoshop, and then she's placed them onto this really fun background with the balloons and the flowers for a really spring effect. And notice how she's weaved the yellow throughout her design to lead the eye. You've got the yellow of the watering can, the hat, the flower, and then the heart. So I love this fluid motion that the eye follows throughout the design of the page. I also like how she's used the paper edge as sort of a ledge for this little girl to stand on. So I hope you have enjoyed this particular tutorial. It was a bit long. I wanted to try something different in sharing some of my process behind the creation of this collection. I also wanted to provide some insight to those of you that have never used my products before. I wanted to show you how easy they are to use by dragging and dropping them onto a canvas. And for more advanced users, hopefully I have been able to provide some inspiration in creating artistry without photos. I would love to hear your feedback on this format if you would be willing to post in the comments below. It really helps me to guide the content in this space to what you want to see. So I do appreciate that feedback, and it just tells me that you guys are watching and learning something from these videos. And of course, if you have any questions, you can reach me at classes@AnnaAspnesDesigns.com, and of course I'll leave that information in this video below. Hope you have a great week and create something beautiful with the ArtPlay Palette Melic collection. Thanks for being here, and I will be back in this space again very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.